Imagine a room, a private study, inside a grand, old stone manor, hidden deep within the misty English countryside. The windows are tightly locked from the inside, the heavy wooden shutters are fastened, and the only door is bolted shut with a massive iron key. A man steps into this room at midnight. He locks the door behind him. His family watches the light beneath his door until the early hours of the morning. But when the sun rises and the door is finally broken open, the room is completely empty. The man has vanished into thin air, leaving nothing behind but a warm, untouched cup of chamomile tea. How can a soul disappear from a room that no one can enter and no one can leave? Welcome to Bedtime Stories. I promise to bring you a new peaceful journey every single day. Since this channel is brand new, your support means everything to me. If you enjoy this mystery tonight, please leave a like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what city or country you're listening from. It really helps our quiet community grow. Now, get comfortable, close your eyes, relax, and let us unravel the secret. The rain had been falling over Blackwood Manor for 3 consecutive days. It was not a violent storm, but a steady, rhythmic summer rain that wrapped the ancient stone estate in a thick, silver blanket of fog. The heavy drops pattered softly against the tall, arched windows, creating a continuous hypnotic hum that seemed to slow down time itself. Inside the grand house, the air was warm, smelling of old polished mahogany, beeswax candles, and the faint, sweet scent of burning pine logs from the fireplace. The master of the house was a man named Arthur. To the outside world and to his beloved family, Arthur was the definition of absolute stability and respectability. He was a gentle, quiet man of 50 with kind eyes and silver hair at his temples. He had spent his entire life maintaining the dignity of his family name and ensuring that his beautiful wife, Eleanor, and their 2 grown children never knew a single day of worry. Eleanor was a graceful woman of 45. She loved the quiet life of the manor, spending her days tending to the indoor gardens and reading by the hearth. Their children were no longer toddlers. Their son, Edward, was 20 years old, a quiet student with a passion for history, and their daughter, Grace, was 18, possessing her father's calm and observant nature. They were a picture-perfect, wealthy family, or so everyone believed. On that fateful evening, the manor was exceptionally quiet. The clock in the grand hall had just chimed 11 times. Edward and Grace had already retired to their respective bedrooms upstairs, their footsteps fading softly on the thick carpets. The house was settling into its nightly rest. Arthur, however, remained in his private study on the first floor. It was a magnificent room, lined with thousands of leather-bound books, a heavy oak desk, and a large window overlooking the misty cliffs. Arthur had been spending a lot of time in this room lately. Eleanor had noticed a deep, silent exhaustion in her husband's eyes over the past few weeks, though he always masked it with a warm, reassuring smile. "You are working too hard, my dear," Eleanor said softly, stepping into the dimly lit study. She carried a delicate porcelain cup. "I made you some warm chamomile tea. Please, drink it and promise me you will come to bed soon. The ledger can wait until morning." Arthur looked up from his desk. For a brief second, his face looked incredibly weary, shadowed by the single desk lamp. But as he looked at his wife, his eyes softened and he smiled his usual deeply comforting smile. He reached out and gently took her hand, his fingers warm. "Thank you, Eleanor," Arthur whispered, his voice smooth and steady. "Your chamomile tea is exactly what I need. I promise I will lock up and come upstairs shortly. Do not wait for me." Eleanor smiled, leaned down to kiss his cheek, and walked toward the door. As she reached the threshold, she turned back. Arthur was already taking a slow sip of this tea, looking out at the dark, rainy window. "Good night, Arthur," she said. "Good night, my love," he replied. As always, when Eleanor closed the heavy oak door behind her, she heard the familiar distinct sound of the iron key turning in the lock from the inside. Arthur had a strict habit when he worked. He required absolute, uninterrupted concentration. He never allowed anyone, not even the servants, to disturb him when he was thinking. He always locked the door from within, and he never left the key in the keyhole. He would always place it securely on his desk or in his pocket. Eleanor walked up the grand staircase, listening to the soft, rhythmic ticking of the house and the steady purr of the rain outside. When she reached the top landing, she looked down and saw the faint, golden silver of light shining from beneath Arthur's study door. It was a comforting sight. Her husband was safe inside his fortress of books, drinking his tea. With a peaceful heart, Eleanor went to bed and fell into a deep sleep. Hours passed in perfect stillness. The rain continued its gentle lullaby, washing over the stone walls of Blackwood Manor. The light beneath the study door remained burning, a solitary golden thread in the dark house, until the first pale grey light of dawn began to break through the mist. At 7 o'clock in the morning, Eleanor woke up. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the morning air crisp and silent. She turned over, expecting to see Arthur sleeping beside her, but his side of the bed was completely untouched. The sheets were smooth and cold. Eleanor frowned slightly, a small flutter of concern touching her heart, though she quickly dismissed it. He must have fallen asleep at his desk again, she thought to herself. It wouldn't be the first time Arthur had grown so absorbed in his reading that he drifted off in his large armchair. She put on her morning gown and walked downstairs. The grand house was entirely quiet. She approached the study door. The silver light beneath it was gone now, extinguished. Eleanor knocked gently on the dark wood. "Arthur?" she called out softly. "Arthur, dear, it's morning. The sun is up." There was no answer. Only the deep, heavy silence of the manor responded. Eleanor knocked a little louder, the wood making a sharp sound in the quiet hallway. "Arthur, are you awake?" Still, There was absolute stillness from inside the room. Eleanor tried the brass door knob. She twisted it, but it wouldn't budge. The door was firmly, securely locked from the inside. "He must be sleeping very deeply," Eleanor murmured. She decided to let him rest a little longer. She walked to the kitchen to prepare breakfast, hoping that the aroma of fresh coffee and warm bread would eventually wake him. By 8 o'clock, Edward and Grace had come downstairs. They sat at the dining table, noticing the mother's quiet distraction. "Is father still in his study?" Grace asked, pouring some tea. "He usually never misses breakfast." "Yes," Eleanor said, her voice carrying a slight edge of nervousness now. "The door is locked. I knocked twice, but he did not answer. I am sure he is just exhausted, but it is unlike him." "Let me try," Edward said. The young man walked down the corridor and knocked firmly on the oak door. "Father, it's Edward. We are waiting for you for breakfast." Silence. Not a rustle of paper, not the sound of a chair moving. Nothing. A cold dread began to creep into the hallway. Grace joined them, her face growing pale. "This isn't right," she whispered. "Even if he was asleep, he would have heard that knock." "Could something have happened to him inside?" Eleanor gasped, her hands beginning to tremble. "What if he fell ill? What if he cannot reach the door?" "The window," Grace suggested suddenly, her eyes wide. "The study window looks out onto the side garden. Maybe we can see inside from there." Edward immediately ran toward the grand entrance, throwing the front doors open. The morning air was damp, and the wet grass soaked his shoes as he hurried around the side of the massive stone house, followed closely by Grace and Eleanor. They walked through the rose bushes until they stood directly beneath the large window of Arthur's study. The wooden shutters were open, but the heavy glass window itself was completely closed and locked from the inside. The dark velvet curtains were partially drawn, leaving only a narrow gap through which they could see. Edward leaned forward, pressing his face close to the damp glass, shielding his eyes from the morning glare. He peered into the dimly lit room. The study was in perfect order. The desk lamp was off. On the desk, the porcelain cup of chamomile tea sat exactly where Eleanor had left it, now cold and empty. Arthur's leather armchair was pushed back slightly, but Arthur was not in it. Edward moved along the window, trying to look into the corners of the room. He looked toward the small sofa, the bookshelves, the floor. The room was completely, entirely empty. There was no one in sight. "Edward?" Eleanor called out from behind him, her voice cracking with terror. "What do you see? Is he asleep on the sofa?" Edward turned around slowly, his face completely pale, his eyes filled with utter bewilderment. "Mother," Edward whispered, his voice shaking. "He isn't there. The room is empty." "What do you mean empty?" Eleanor cried, rushing to the window herself. She pressed her hands against the cold glass, staring into the quiet, deserted study. Her breath fogged the window. She scanned every corner. Her husband, the man who had locked himself in this very room just 9 hours ago, was gone. "But that's impossible," Grace stammered, tears welling up in her eyes.
The door is locked from the inside. We heard the key turn. The windows are locked from the inside. The house was sealed for the night. Where could he go? He could not have just vanished through the walls."
They rushed back into the house. Edward threw his weight against the heavy oak study door, but the old Victorian lock was solid iron. It didn't even shake. Together, Edward and the estate gardener, who had been called in from the grounds, used a heavy iron tool to force the lock. With a loud, splintering crash, the door finally flew open. The family burst into the room. The air inside was still and smelled faintly of chamomile and old paper. Eleanor ran to the desk. She looked for the key. It was nowhere to be found. The windows were indeed fastened tightly from within. It was physically impossible for anyone to have opened them from the outside or closed them from within after leaving. There were no hidden trapdoors, no secret panels behind the bookshelves. Arthur had checked the structural integrity of the manor years ago. Arthur had simply vanished from a locked fortress, leaving his family in a state of absolute, paralyzed shock. By noon, the news of the mysterious disappearance had reached the nearby town. Desperate, terrified, and completely heartbroken, Eleanor knew there was only one man who could solve a riddle this impossible. She sent a carriage to the city to fetch the most celebrated, brilliant, and observant mind in the region, a private detective known for unraveling the most dark and complex secrets. The mystery of Blackwood Manor had officially begun. The afternoon brought a heavier mist, which rolled in from the nearby sea cliffs and hung low over the gardens of Blackwood Manor. The broken lock of the study door had been temporarily removed, leaving the entrance to the room completely open, like an unhealed wound in the heart of the house. Inside, nothing had been touched. Eleanor had strictly ordered the servants to leave everything exactly as it was, preserving the quiet, eerie scene from the one man who could make sense of it. At exactly 3 o'clock, a sleek, dark carriage pulled up the gravel driveway. From it stepped Detective Julian Vance. Julian was a man of sharp contrasts. He wore a long charcoal-colored tailored coat that seemed to absorb the grey light of the misty afternoon. He was not young, yet his movements possessed a deliberate, feline agility. His most striking feature was his eyes, pale, piercing blue, and entirely unblinking when he focused on a detail. He did not carry himself with the loud arrogance of city police. Instead, he radiated a quiet, profound calm that instantly brought a sense of order to the panicked atmosphere of the manor. Eleanor, Edward, and Grace met him in the grand hall. The crackle of the fireplace was the only sound as Julian slowly took off his leather gloves. "Madam," Julian said, his voice a low, resonant baritone that felt like a warm blanket in the chilly house. "I came as soon as your message reached the city. I understand your hearts are heavy with worry. Please, take a deep breath. Every riddle has a key, and no man truly vanishes without leaving a path behind him. Tell me everything, from the moment the sun went down yesterday." Sitting by the hearth, her hands tightly wrapping a warm cup of tea, Eleanor recounted the entire evening. She described Charles' unusual fatigue,
the warm chamomile tea she had brewed to soothe his overworked mind, the soft click of the iron key turned from the inside, and the terrifying discovery at dawn. Edward explained how he had peered through the locked window, seeing the empty room, and how they had finally broken the door open with an iron tool. Julian listened without interrupting once. He stood perfectly still, his eyes closed, as if he were constructing a perfect three-dimensional map of the evening inside his mind. When Eleanor finished, a heavy silence fell over the room. "An absolute enclosure," Julian murmured softly, opening his eyes. "A door locked from within, windows fastened from the inside, a room with no secret passages, yet the man is gone. Fascinating. Let us look at the stage where this theatre took place." Julian walked down the corridor, his footsteps making no sound on the wooden floorboards. He stepped into Charles' private study. The room was cold now, the fire in the small hearth having died out hours ago. The detective did not rush to the desk. He stood at the threshold for a full 2 minutes, simply observing the atmosphere. He looked at the high ceilings, the massive rows of leather-bound books, and the way the grey afternoon light cut through the velvet curtains. Then he began his examination. It was a slow, hypnotic process to watch. Julian moved around the room in a perfect circle, examining the floorboards one by one. He knelt down, pressing his ear to the wood, tapping lightly with his knuckles to check for any hollow spaces or hidden trapdoors. There were none. The oak was solid, ancient, and undisturbed. Next, he moved to the windows. He examined the heavy brass latches. They were firmly in place, covered in a thin, undisturbed layer of condensation from the cold rain outside. If anyone had opened the window from the outside, the consideration would have been smeared. If someone had jumped out and closed it from the outside, the internal latch could not have been turned into the locking position. The windows were legally and physically sealed. Finally, Julian approached the heavy mahogany desk. On it lay a leather-bound financial ledger, closed neatly. Next to it sat the delicate porcelain cup that Eleanor had brought the night before. Julian leaned down, his face inches from the cup. He picked up by the handle with extreme care. He swirled the tiny bit of dark liquid left at the very bottom, bringing it to his nose. He sniffed it deeply. A subtle, sharp line appeared between his brows. "Your husband drank the entirety of the tea, madam," Julian called out to Eleanor, who was standing anxiously at the door. "But tell me, did Charles usually complain of a bitter taste in his chamomile?" Eleanor blinked, caught off guard. "No, never. I harvest the chamomile myself from the garden. It is always sweet and mild. Why do you ask, detective?" Julian did not answer immediately. He placed the cup down precisely where it has been. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small silver magnifying glass. He began to inspect the surface of the desk. Near the edge of the ledger, his eyes caught something. A few tiny, translucent crystals, no larger than grains of salt, were scattered on the dark wood. He touched one with the tip of his finger and brought it to his tongue. A faint, bitter, numbing sensation spread across his lips. "Sedative," Julian thought to himself, his mind spinning a new thread. a very powerful, tasteless sleeping draught. But who put it there? And why would Charles willingly drug himself or allow someone else to do it? Julian turned his attention to the financial ledger. He opened the heavy cover. The pages were filled with long columns of elegant, precise handwriting, Charles' calculations. But as Julian flipped toward the most recent pages, the neat handwriting began to fracture. The numbers became rushed, trembling, as if written by a man facing an immense, suffocating pressure. Julian's sharp eyes scanned the final rows of figures. His breath caught slightly. To the outside world, Charles was a man of great wealth, a pillar of society. But these private pages told a dark, hidden truth. The manor was not in immediate danger, but Charles' personal capital was entirely depleted. He had put vast, astronomical sums of money into mysterious accounts over the last 2 years. Julian looked closer at the dates. The largest withdrawals had occurred recently, and there was a specific note written in a cramped, desperate script at the bottom of the last page. The debt of the past cannot be paid with the gold alone. He demands everything. If the truth comes to light, Eleanor and the children will be ruined. I must find a way out. Julian closed the ledger with a soft, decisive thought that echoed in the quiet room. He realized now that this was not a simple missing person case. Charles was harboring a massive secret burden that he had kept entirely hidden from his family. He had been borrowing money at extortionate, dangerous interest rates, driving himself into a corner. But why? To cover up what truth? Julian walked over to the armchair and inspected the cushions. There, tucked deeply into the fold, between the seat and the armrest, he found a small piece of paper. It was a torn scrap from a cheap, city-made envelope. It smelled faintly of stale tobacco and cheap ink, completely unlike the expensive, lavender-scented stationery used in Blackwood Manor. On the scrap of paper, a single sentence was written in an aggressive, uneducated hand. Midnight, the old oak tree by the east gate. Bring the final sum, or the ghost of Rose will speak to the whole town. Julian's pale eyes narrowed. Rose, he thought, a name from the past. A hidden lever used to crush a proud man's life. The detective walked out of the study and found the estate head housekeeper, an elderly woman named Martha, who had served the family for 40 years. He led her to a quiet corner of the conservatory, away from Eleanor and the children. "Martha," Julian said softly, his voice gentle but firm. "You have known Charles since he was a young man. I need you to think very carefully. Has anyone unusual visited the manor recently? A stranger from the city, perhaps? Someone who did not belong in these quiet valleys?" Martha's old hands trembled, her eyes darting around nervously before she looked down. "Oh, detective," she whispered, her voice shaking with fear. "I didn't want to say anything to the mistress. She has enough grief. But 2 weeks ago, when the mistress was visiting her sister in the next county, a young man came to the service door. He was rough, dressed in a dirty city coat, with anger in his eyes. He demanded to see the master." "And did Charles see him?" Julian pressed, leaning closer. "Yes, sir." Martha nodded, a tear slipping down her wrinkled cheek. The master took him straight into his study. They were in there for over an hour. I was polishing the silver in the dining room, and I could hear the voices through the wall. Well, not the master's voice. He was quiet, as he always is. But the young man, he was shouting. He kept saying, "You owe me my life. My mother died in the poorhouse because of you, cowardice." When the young man left, the master looked as though he had seen a ghost. He didn't eat his dinner that night. He just sat in the dark. Ah, poor master.
Julian smiled gently, patting the old woman's hand. "You have done well, Martha. This information is the first real ray of light in this dark forest. Did you happen to hear the young man's name?"
"The master called him Lucas,"
Martha whispered.
"I heard him say it just once, right before the door closed. The master called him Lucas,"
Martha whispered.
"I heard him say it just once, right before the door closed."
Julian stood up, looking out the window at the grey, foggy moors. The puzzle pieces were beginning to fall into place. A hidden debt, a mysterious powerful sedative, a secret son named Lucas, and a desperate father trying to protect his innocent family from total social ruin. Charles had not vanished into thin air through magical mysticism. He planned this escape with the meticulous mind of a man who had nothing left to lose. Julian turned back toward the main hall, his face set in a look of grim determination. "Edward," he called out to the young son, "prepare the horses. You and I are going into the city. It is time to find a young man named Lucas." The city was dirty, loud, and choked with the heavy smoke of coal factories, a harsh contrast to the quiet dignity of Blackwood Manor. Detective Julian Vance and young Edward did not lose a single moment. Following the clues left on the cheap envelope and the whispers of old Martha, Julian led them straight to the foggy tavern district near the city docks, the exact place where a desperate young man from the poorhouse would hide. They found Lucas sitting in the dim corner of a smoky tavern, counting a small stack of gold coins with angry, bitter eyes. He looked remarkably like Charles around the jawline, but his face was hardened by years of poverty and resentment. Julian did not waste time with polite conversation. He stepped into the wooden booth, his shadow completely blocking the candlelight, while Edward stood firmly behind him. Before Lucas could even reach for his coat, Julian's hand clamped down on the young man's wrist with the cold, surprising strength of an iron vice. "Listen to me very carefully, Lucas," Julian whispered, his pale blue eyes flashing with a dangerous sharp light that made the boy freeze. "I know who you are. I know about Rose, and I know about the anonymous letters you sent to Charles. Chantage, extortion, is a severe crime that will send you to the city prison for the rest of your days. You think you are torturing a wealthy man, but you are destroying yourself." Lucas tried to pull away, his face turning pale as he looked into the detective's unblinking eyes. The anger inside him suddenly cracked, revealing the hollow grief of a son who had lost his mother. "He left us," Lucas hissed, his voice trembling. "My mother worked herself to the grave while he lived in a stone palace." "Your mother never wanted this for you," Julian said, his voice dropping to a calmer, softer tone, though his grip remained tight. "Charles did not know about you until 2 weeks ago, and instead of denying you, he ruined his own finances, trying to pay your demands because he felt the crushing weight of guilt. But the game is over." Julian pulled a blank piece of paper and an inkwell from his tailored coat, slamming them onto the wooden table.
You will write an official confession and a waiver right now, Julian ordered firmly, giving Lucas' wrist a sharp twist to emphasize his words. You will state that you have no legal or personal claims against Charles or the family name of Blackwood. In return, I will ensure you do not spend the next 20 years in a cold cell. Do it. Now. Terrified by the detective's cold authority and realizing his leverage was completely broken, Lucas took the pen with trembling fingers and wrote a document exactly as Julian dictated. Once the paper was safely in Julian's pocket, the detective softened his posture. Charles is a good man, Lucas. He never stopped feeling the tragedy of your mother's life. Even now, he does not hate you. But you must leave this valley forever. With the confession in hand, Julian and Edward immediately left the smoky city, riding their horses hard back toward the coastline. Julian had one final piece of the puzzle to solve. During the carriage ride, he had remembered a quiet detail Eleanor mentioned during the conversation by the hearth. A small abandoned summer cottage built high on the rocky cliffs, overlooking the crashing waves of the Atlantic Ocean. A place Charles loved to visit when he was a young man. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the rainy sky in deep shades of purple and gold, Julian and Edward reached the edge of the cliffs. There, standing completely alone against the sea wind, was the cold wooden cottage. A thin, fragile trail of grey smoke was lazily rising from its stone chimney. Edward rushed forward, throwing the wooden door open. Inside, sitting by a small crackling fire with a blanket over his shoulders, was Charles. He looked small, exhausted, but entirely peaceful. On the wooden table, next to him, lay the small silver pocket watch and the empty vial of powerful sedative he had slipped into his own tea that night. A clever trick to ensure he would sleep heavily. Wait until the house was entirely silent and then slip out of the window using a spare key he had hidden inside his desk. He had locked the door from the inside before leaving through the window, fastening the inner latch through a tiny invisible wire loop he had practiced using for weeks, creating the perfect illusion of a mystical disappearance. He had wanted his family to believe he was gone or stolen, hoping that without him, the greedy demands of Lucas would stop, and Eleanor could simply sell the massive estate, clear the secret debts, and live a quiet, comfortable life in a smaller house. He had sacrificed his entire existence to protect their peace. "Father!" Edward cried, rushing across the room and throwing his arms around his father's tired shoulders. Charles blinked in utter shock, tears instantly filling his kind eyes as he held his son tightly. "Edward, how did you find me? I did it all to save you. I didn't want the shame of my past to ruin your future." Detective Julian Vance stepped inside the warm cottage, closing the door against the cold ocean wind. He pulled the signed waiver from his coat and placed it gently on the table next to the silver watch. "The past is settled, Charles," Julian said, a warm, genuine smile breaking across his sharp face. "Lucas has signed the waiver and left the valley. He will never trouble your family again. Your wife and your children do not care about the grand manor, the gold, or the opinions of high society. They only care about you." 2 days later, the family was gathered once again in the grand hall of Blackwood Manor. The massive stone house was being prepared for sale, They were moving to a smaller, incredibly cozy villa by the southern coast. There was no sadness in the air, only an immense, beautiful sense of relief. The heavy burden of secrets had been lifted, replaced by total forgiveness and love. Charles sat by the roaring fireplace, his hand safely tucked inside Eleanor's, while Edward and Grace laughed quietly by the window. Julian Vance stood at the doorway, putting on his leather gloves. He looked at the happy family, knowing his work was done. He had not just solved a locked room mystery, he had brought a father back home. He slipped out into the quiet evening air as the first stars began to blink above the misty valley. Thank you for spending this night with me. I wish you the most peaceful, deep sleep and the most beautiful dreams. Sleep well and good night.